Good morning, everyone. Thrilled to be here today. I'm Mary Dillon, and I'm the chair of the Economic Club of Chicago. And thank you for joining us today. And I'm really pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Lisa Su, today. So before I begin, I want to remind you and encourage you to ask questions. You can submit them at the bottom of your screen, and then we will take the most popular questions as we get through the program today. And so now on to today's program. So first of all, if you can't find a PlayStation 5, don't blame it on technologist turned CEO, Dr. Lisa Su. The explosive computing power and the hottest gaming system in just about every device that we are attached to every day relies on the design skills of Advanced Micro Devices, AMD. Lisa is credited with shifting the focus of the $16.4 billion company, publicly traded company, away from chip manufacturing to focus on custom designing the most sophisticated microprocessor for high performing products, including PlayStation, Xbox, and Tesla, to name just a few, and data center clients like Meta Platforms, Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. A graduate of MIT, where she received her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in electrical engineering, Lisa started her career as part of the technical staff at Texas Instruments and was SVP and general manager of Freescale Semiconductor. But Lisa credits her time as chief technology advisor to Lou Gerstner at IBM as the foundational training that helped prepare her to become a CEO. Lisa is an AMD and Cisco board member, and in 2020, Fortune named Lisa #2 on its Business Person of the Year list. So let's get on to today's program. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
It's great to be here with you, Mary. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. And I thought what I could do is start with a little bit just about you as a person and your background. So I know that you were born in Taiwan. You came to the States, I think, when you were 3 years old. Your dad's a statistician. Your mom was an accountant turned entrepreneur. And I think I understood from what I've read that, as early as maybe 10 years old, you were decommissioning and rebuilding your brother's remote control cars. So the notion of building things has been in your DNA for a long time. But I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got from there to here at a high level.
Yeah, so absolutely, Mary. Well, look, it's one of these things when you think about, hey, how did you grow up? I grew up, as you said, my parents immigrated from Taiwan, and I was born in Taiwan, and I was raised in New York. And I think this was always an opportunity where I enjoyed learning new things, and learning new things meant playing with my brother's remote controlled cars. And when they broke, we were like, well, why did it break? Let's figure out how we can get it working again. And also, just a strong focus on math and science. My father drilled me on multiplication tables when we were young, and that was sort of in our DNA a little bit. And growing up with math and science in our background, MIT was a great place to go to school, and that's when I first fell in love with semiconductors. So the whole idea of building things means that you can actually touch and feel, what your work is going towards, and that's how I became an engineer. And the rest is all about semiconductors.
The rest is all about semiconductors. Well, it is all about semiconductors. And you and I have kind of joked about this. It's become like the hottest topic that people didn't know much about in the past until, of course, the pandemic and supply chain shortages and whatnot. But it's obviously such an important part of our lives. And I thought maybe you could just, at a high level, describe for the audience a little bit about the industry, right? I mean, we're paying closer attention now, but I think that most of us, everybody has one of these in their hands at all time, as well as many other things. And maybe you could just kind of help describe a little bit about what is the role of the microchip. I remember learning about Moore's law back in college, and this notion of being able to double the size of what goes on a small chip every year. I don't know if that still holds or not, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the industry and how it affects our lives day to day.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. Well, look, I've spent my entire career in semiconductors, and I used to have to explain to people, what a semiconductor is. These days, more people are familiar with it, but the semiconductors are really, really the devices, sort of the small microchips that power pretty much, everything. So if you think about, your car, if you think about your computers, if you think about, even now you think about what you use in your businesses, sort of in enterprises and in the cloud. All of those are powered by semiconductors. And the whole you mentioned Moore's law, Mary. So Moore's law is the idea that every couple of years you can double the performance, you can reduce the cost, and you can put a lot more capability on these small chips. And we've really used that. I would say that that's sort of been the guiding principle around how do we make our devices smarter. And I like to say that the whole thing about semiconductors is, you shouldn't even have to think about it, because your devices are smart enough and capable enough to deliver the power and performance that you need to accomplish, whether it's a computing application, or it's your phone, or it's your watch, or it's your refrigerator. All of those have chips in it to help make them more intelligent and really do what needs to be done.
Well, and also, first of all, I was trying to get extra credit points by throwing out Moore's law. So,
You
just so
did
you know.
good. You did good,
Thank
Mary.
you. What can I say? But even in doing my research, even just are the words semiconductor and microchip interchangeable? I know this is a very specific question, but I was just kind of curious. I hear both terms.
Yeah, I think they're pretty interchangeable. And when you think about, sort of, they're all different types of chips and all different types of semiconductors. If you want to get into the nitty gritty detail, you can talk about, some are digital chips that do a lot of computing, some are analog chips that really connect, sort of the physical world to the digital world. There are all kinds of different chips or semiconductors, but in general, you can use them pretty interchangeably.
Okay, so for today's purposes, we'll use it. We'll keep it simple like that. I appreciate that. So this is probably a good time to segue to talk about AMD. So I know a lot of people know about the company Intel. You're one of your competitors. It's a name that everybody knows. AMD is maybe less known, but obviously a huge force and factor, and under your leadership has just continued to grow. But AMD's market cap is over $180 billion. And this other company I just named is only a quarter of that. So I wouldn't have guessed that before. So maybe you could do this. Give us a brief overview of AMD, kind of what's your core business, competitive set, what makes AMD great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, AMD has been in business for over 50 years. We started as, again, back in the day, in terms of when semiconductors and chips were becoming important. And, our specialty is in, high performance, devices or high performance semiconductors. So if you think about, where we focus in things like data center. So your cloud environment, your enterprise data centers. We focus on PCs. So if you have a PC, you may have an AMD chip in it. We focus on gaming, and you mentioned at the beginning, Mary, PlayStation 5, Microsoft Xbox, Valve's new Steam Deck. These all have AMD chips in it. And what we really do is we push the envelope on technology. So our goals are always faster, better. Every year there's a new upgrade and new function and new capability that we can put into our devices, and that adds a tremendous value to the ecosystem, whether you're a business or whether you're a consumer of devices.
And okay, so maybe the next thing I'll ask is I believe that AMD used to both design and manufacture chips. And then you split that off to focus on design. So talk a little bit about why you made that decision and when you made that decision.
Yeah, so about 15 years ago, actually, there was when you think about sort of the semiconductor ecosystem, what I can tell you is there's probably two things that are important to understand. The first is that it's a very long design cycle. So we think about things on the order of 3 to 5 years. The chips that my R&D team are working on today will really come to market 3 to 5 years from now, and so it's a very long design cycle. And the second thing is it's just extremely expensive. So this whole idea of Moore's law, or being able to double your performance every couple of years, means that the capital equipment investment and just all of the investments required to manufacture these chips are really range in the tens of billions of dollars, for the most, leading edge manufacturing plants. And so about 15 years ago, we did make a decision that we would become a design company and that we would outsource our manufacturing. It was one of the larger decisions in the company. We actually spun off our manufacturing facilities, and our manufacturing facilities were the beginning of a company called Global Foundries, which is actually at manufacturing in New York and a bunch of other locations. And we did that because there's economies of scale. When you think about the large, capital investments that are required, when you have the ability to really share your manufacturing with a bunch of other companies, there's economies of scale there. And so we outsource our manufacturing. We focus on design. It's very sophisticated design, and we work with manufacturing partners like Global Foundries, like Taiwan Semiconductor is the largest semiconductor manufacturing, sort of external manufacturing capability. So that was one of the larger decisions that we have made to focus and ensure that we could be the best in our field.
Strategy is all about what to do and what not to do, right? And how to focus and gain competitive edge. And you pretty recently made a very large acquisition, the company Xilinx, if I'm saying that correctly. So maybe talk a little bit about how that fed into your strategy, how that continues to help you be competitive in this marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mary, I'm going to correct you a little bit. It's Xilinx, but I understand it's hard to pronounce.
Xilinx. I knew I'd get it wrong, so thank you. Okay.
But
I made it sound like
yeah,
a
so
pharmaceutical the way I said it.
well, so for the last I've been CEO 7 years, and for the last 7 years, our focus has been organic growth in the company, and we've grown a lot. When I became CEO, I think we were about a $4 billion company, and last year we closed the year at $16 billion, and that was all done organically. And we see tremendous organic growth. Just the demand for semiconductors and the demand for high performance computing is continuing to grow, and we see that. But we also saw an opportunity to really broaden our portfolio, and in semiconductors, it is about scale. So as you have broader portfolios, you can do more to help customers. I'd like to believe that our role in life is to help our largest customers, solve their most important problems or challenges. And as you have more scale and more intellectual property, you're able to do that. You're able to just frankly, be a better partner. So Xilinx is another semiconductor company with a specialty in what they call FPGAs. These are programmable chips, as well as adaptive chips. These are capabilities that we didn't have within core AMD. They're number one in their field. And so as we brought the teams together, it's very, very exciting. It's the largest semiconductor acquisition in history. So it was a big deal. It took us 15, 16 months to complete all of our regulatory approvals, but we just closed actually last month in February.
That's exciting. That's really cool. And how's the integration going so far? I know it's early days. What can you share about that?
Well, the one thing is when you spend 15 months planning integration, you're so excited to actually start the integration process. It's going very, very well. We've welcomed 5,000 new people to AMD. We're now about 25,000. It's a
Wow.
phenomenal global team, and it's we see already that joint customers that we have are thinking differently about how we can partner together, and really it's about what we can do over the next 5 years, right? There's tremendous opportunity to bring our portfolios together while realizing that it will take time.
That's fantastic. And another kind of buzzword, we'll get to the other buzzwords later, but quantum computing is a topic that comes up a lot. I know, I'm sure you guys are in filing patents in this area and whatnot, and have IP in this area, but can you maybe educate us a little bit, if you can, to the lay audience, but what that is about and how that then would affect what you do?
Yeah, so right now we are very focused on silicon technologies, and silicon is the primary semiconductor technology. By the way, silicon has been amazing. I mean, if you think about the last 40 years of progress in semiconductor chips, it's been sort of continued innovation around this foundation. Now, there is some belief that at some point we will reach some physical limits in how we are, currently building computer chips. And so, quantum computing is another, very early research phase, ideas that are out there. It is exciting. I think it is, as you said, Mary. It's one of the buzzwords out there. I would say it's still, I would say, further out in time. So I would put that in more of the 10-year ish time frame. And what really happens is there are all these great ideas that we have in, let's call it, fundamental research. And then as we get closer to deciding what's going to be right for the products over the next couple of years, we evaluate, the different technologies. So I think quantum computing is very exciting. It's one of those areas where there's a lot of research at universities. There's a lot of research in, some of the, larger companies like IBM Research is very big in quantum computing, and there's some startups. But I would say it's still a little bit early in its product cycle.
Got it. And I'm sure there's many in the audience today who are focused on this at our own universities and some of our, our organizations. So more to come on that. And I appreciate the long-term horizon on which the planning needs to happen for the industry. And it may be another question on this after we talked about your acquisition of Xilinx. Do you anticipate more consolidation happening in the industry, this notion of more scale needed? Although you just made the biggest acquisition so far, do you see more coming?
I think as an industry, we have been on a path of consolidation, and the consolidation is, for the reasons that I mentioned, that it's expensive to do leading edge development. Scale helps because you can spread it over larger product portfolios. Customers like to be able to, sort of mix and match components. And so having a broader portfolio is a good thing. So I do think there will be more consolidation overall in the industry. And from an AMD standpoint, I think we're always open to looking at what makes sense. But we have, consolidation had typically been because, of companies that weren't seeing a lot of growth. I would say that's not the case today. I would say that the semiconductor industry is seeing unprecedented growth. Really, I mean, the demand for semiconductors has been amazing. So it's more from a standpoint of portfolio and how do you sort of augment your portfolio.
Got it. Got it. Well, so maybe we can shift gears a little bit. And what I'd like to do is talk about the geopolitical topics of the day, but then really come back to American competitiveness as well, right? So these are, I mean, having you here, it's a privilege to have you here, and you're in the center of such an important industry globally. And being a CEO today, in general, is not for the faint of heart in any industry, right? I mean, leadership required from going through a global pandemic, supply chain, crises, interlocking crises, I guess I'd say, inflation, and now, what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia. So I guess, and one thing that I've stepped back and learned a little bit about is sometimes you take for granted things like, the periodic table of elements and how elements and minerals around the world are actually really important to the manufacturing of so many things. And so, Russia and Ukraine, I mean, obviously we need to talk about this, critical for chip manufacturing. And I guess what some estimates say is that 50% of some of the semiconductor grade neon and palladium supply are coming from those parts of the world. So just at a high level, I wondered if you could help us. How do you think about times of crisis like this, and how do you plan contingencies around manufacturing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mary, you've definitely done your homework on semiconductors. So, what I would say is, and I think you said it well in your comment. The last couple of years has required sort of a very, agile approach to how to manage, and whether you're talking about sort of the pandemic, or you're talking about some of the supply chain disruptions, or in this case, on the very sort of sad, crisis that is going on in Ukraine. I think we all feel for everyone who is involved, and from a sort of a business management standpoint, I would say that the best way to deal with these things is to have contingencies and to have multiple sources. So, specifically to your question on the supply chain reaction to the Ukraine-Russia situation, I would say that the semiconductor industry has planned. So I think there were plans in place to ensure that there would be a good amount of reserves for the gases that you talked about. And so, at this point, we don't see any disruption of the supply chain as a result of that. We are seeing some other disruptions in the supply chain just due to some of the COVID flare-ups in certain parts of the world. You'll see that some of the logistics corridors do close. Some of the shipping corridors do close, at least for a period of time, as countries are taking actions. And those things, you just have to have contingencies, and you have to have multiple sources, and you have to have we manufacture across a number of different sites and countries to be able to keep that to be able to manage through some fairly unpredictable situations.
Right. And back to Ukraine, I appreciate where you started. And I did not for a minute mean to, go straight to the business issue. But I know every morning I wake up thinking about mothers and children trying to, survive what's really horrific and unbelievable to see this in our life. So with the business implications just being, I guess, a small part of that. So I guess, but staying on the business, you already referenced this, but I know Shenzhen has just shut down for a while because of another COVID lockdown. There's a lot of chip manufacturing in Taiwan. So, this is truly, I mean, we all operate in a global interconnected economy, especially yours. So, is there anything else as you think about the future? And maybe it's a good pivot to talk about U.S. competitiveness, right? So we recently had Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo speak to the club, which was quite an honor. And she talked about the need for her desire for the U.S. to become more self-reliant on chip manufacturing and the Chips for America Act, which is, I'm not sure exactly where it sits today, but the idea is that the government will invest $50 billion in the semiconductor industry. So what do you think about that? Is this enough? Do you support it? How do you think we can help the U.S. also be a source of great growth in this growth industry?
Yeah. So first of all, Secretary Raimondo is amazing, and she has been such a supporter of the semiconductor industry. And frankly, it's been really wonderful to work with the Department of Commerce and the folks who are really thinking about sort of U.S. competitiveness and semiconductor competitiveness. And what I would say is the following, right? The U.S. Has reduced the amount of manufacturing onshore over the last 10 years, and it's a significant reduction. So think about it as we might do now something like 12, 13% of our own manufacturing, and the view is that that's too small, and I think we all agree with that, right? The manufacturing semiconductor manufacturing is very expensive. It does require tens of billions of dollars of investment. It does require multiple years to build up over time. And there are other countries who have subsidized or been more welcoming to semiconductor manufacturing. So, for example, Taiwan hosts a lot of the semiconductor manufacturing. South Korea. You'll see some semiconductor manufacturing on the packaging side in Malaysia, and these countries have built up great ecosystems. I think the U.S. is completely capable of building up a great ecosystem. There is a good amount of semiconductor manufacturing that is still here, but it's not enough given the growth in the overall area. So the CHIPS Act is a great start. I think it's going through both the House and the Senate. And we hope that it will be passed sometime in the near future. And it's a great start by leveling the playing field with some of these incentives that exist outside of the United States, such that manufacturing can be competitive here. And we would love to see more manufacturing onshore. But the thing that I would also mention, Mary, is that it's a very global supply chain and there's interdependencies everywhere. And so I view the CHIPS Act as an important thing to improve U.S. competitiveness, but not one of those things where we're ever going to have everything onshore. Like, I think that ship has sailed, and it's really about just creating more capability such that you do have multiple sources and geographical diversity, and all of those are good things.
Great. And perhaps that's a good opportunity to pivot to thinking about careers. and talent, right, and sources of talent, if we can imagine that in the future we will have, obviously this is something, an area that's going to continue to grow and have huge demand for talent and manufacturing and design. So, and Midwest, I have to say, have a plug for the Midwest here in Chicago. We've got great universities, Illinois at Urbana, IIT, others. So, and we also have, some work happening in like our M Hub or something called MXD, where we're focused on some hard, basically creating capabilities, accelerators for hard tech, or actually in some cases, some manufacturing. So how do you think about how you would advise students thinking about future and cities thinking about how to become more competitive in this arena to position themselves for the future? A city like Chicago, for example.
Yeah, sure. So first, I'm going to make a shameless plug. For students, like hardware is a great thing. Okay, it's great to be able to work on something that you can build, you can touch. You can walk down to Best Buy and see it in the store. So I'm going to say hardware is a great thing. But more seriously, I think the need for engineering talent, and particularly it's engineering across all disciplines, but particularly in semiconductors. With the growth of the need for chips, we just need more engineers, and there's we're growing by leaps and bounds. I mean, we've added. I would say about 25% of our workforce was added last year, and we're adding at that pace. So it's a very fast pace in terms of growth. And these are skills that will stay with you for a long time, because we see significant innovation that's going forward over the next decade. I will say, back to Chicago and sort of the university ecosystem. I mean, I think it's the university ecosystem is absolutely critical, and one of the things that we're saying as part of the semiconductor initiatives in the United States is we need more workforce development. We need the universities to also upgrade their curricula such that they are teaching people about semiconductors and hardware, hardware majors and those types of things. And we've also learned through this pandemic that the workforce can be anywhere. It used to be you hired into a certain city, and now it's you hire where the skilled workers are. And so I think the for Chicago and for Illinois, I think the universities are wonderful, and really being able to attract more companies around those universities, I think will be very straightforward as those university programs expand in some of these, I would say, hard skills to find.
Well, and just to stay on that for a second, so talk to us about how you see hybrid going forward for your company. I mean, obviously, I think this is a hot topic for everybody, and I'm curious how you guys are looking at it.
Yeah, so we operate around the globe, and as we all know, the pandemic has been different everywhere around the globe. But here in the U.S., most of our employees have been work from home for the last 2 years. We have, maybe about 20% of the folks who have come in who are more in labs and things like that. But many people have been enabled to work from home, and I think we're starting our return to office work. So we're actually going to start that here over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And the new normal will be a hybrid environment. There'll be some who will be in the office. There'll be some who prefer a hybrid work environment and working more from home. And then I think there'll be more remote employees than we had in the past. We were only about Mary, at AMD, we were only about 5% remote, prior to this, and I think that'll go up to about 20%, going forward, because people like the flexibility. But in general, I'm looking forward to having people come back into the office. I think there is, you can get a lot done in remote environments, but the wonder, sort of the relationship building. I mentioned we have a lot of new employees who've never stepped into one of our sites yet, and so we're excited to get people back and sort of talking at the water cooler and really that whole creative, collaborative environment that is enabled when you're together.
Right. I want to stay on the topic of culture and talent, and then we're going to go to a lot of questions that we're getting from people watching, which is great. But I would agree. I mean, it seems to me the notion what's really missing is the ability just to get to know people more informally. I feel like now that we're doing and that's what I miss as well as what comes out of that, right? But there's no time to just sort of talk about the weekend anymore when you're just back to back with the calls and just learning about each other. So, but stepping back on talent and culture for a minute, obviously I was reading a quote that something you said, and I can tell you really love talent development. You said, if I can help you do 120% of what you thought was possible, that's fantastic. If I can help everybody do that, we are able to accomplish something that we didn't know we could do. And that's the fun of it. So I know that you've led a cultural transformation at AMD since you've been CEO. I know that talent and culture is really important to you. And maybe you could share a little bit of that with the audience today.
Yeah, sure, Mary. So talent and culture are very important to me, and I would say that it wouldn't be a natural thing that I would think about before I became CEO. Honestly, because I was more on the hey, all these engineering and business topics, but I think the beauty of really bringing a team together, sort of aligned and focused, I think is really what I see in terms of talent and culture. And my philosophy on these things is actually to make things really simple. So, we have three things that we look at as our sort of guiding principles in terms of how we make decisions in the company. And our focus is on number one is we're a technology company. Number one is building great products and ensuring that we're providing an environment such that our engineers could be as creative and efficient and effective as possible. And then I also believe very strongly in our customers and our partners. And so our job is to deepen our relationships with our customers and partners. And if we think about everything from sort of our customers' lens, that helps us in terms of our priorities. And then my third priority is just to simplify everything that we do. Right. I think one of the beauties of being a larger company is that you have a lot of resources. And one of the things that is the downside is sometimes it's hard to get things done. And so I've done as much as I can to try to simplify our work environment, how we make decisions, and ensure that people are empowered to make decisions, and that people are also growing. So I think from a talent standpoint, I was very lucky. I spent the early part of my career at IBM, and I would say that it was a remarkable experience because every 2 years I got to do something different, and I was able to grow and learn and make my share of mistakes and all of that stuff. And that's the environment that we also want to promote, is one where people are just learning and continuously growing and continuously feeling like they're making an impact on the company.
Wow, those are great principles that you've just described, and I would love to dig more into how you're achieving simplification. But we're not going to have enough time because we have a lot of questions from the folks that are watching. And maybe I'll stay on the comment you just made about IBM and moving around and getting new experiences. Because a question I often get, and I bet you do too, is when did you always want to be a CEO, and when did you know you'd be a CEO? And my guess is you probably didn't exactly think this was what you're going to do for a while. I'm not sure, but a question that came from Linda Gu and a club member maybe will help us learn from you about this. So, what was the best career development advice that you ever received? And she says you're an inspiring leader. We'd love to know what advice you'd give to other people and other women who would like to become CEOs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mary, you're right. I didn't, sort of grow up thinking, "Hey, I'm going to be a semiconductor CEO." that wasn't uh, that wasn't necessarily what I said when I was 10. Um, I, I think people really, the way I think about it, the way my career evolved was it really is about setting sort of 5 year goals. And so when I was a young engineer, I set sort of a 5 year goal. Hey, I'd like to be a director in 5 years, or I'd like to be, that was sort of one of my goals. And I didn't know exactly what it would take to become a director, but I knew that I wanted to have a larger impact on the company. And so, I had mentors that I spoke to about, what does it take and what are good experiences for me? And if you think about everything in 5 year chunks, then it's sort of easier to plan. But these are things of twists and turns. And to the specific question about advice, the best piece of career advice that I got when I was a young engineer was one of my managers, said to me, Lisa, when you select your next assignment, think about running towards problems. And I didn't really know what that meant, but
Mm.
I now realize that that was such great advice because, and by the way, it's the same advice that I give young engineers today. It's like there's so many things that you can work on, and there's so many things that are important, but where you can really make the most impact is actually something that's not doing very well. So if you're running towards problems, you're probably, number one, you're going to learn a lot, and number two, you're going to do something that's very, very valuable, because you're fixing something that needs to be fixed. And if you do that enough times, people will recognize your significant contributions, and you'll get sort of the next big project to do that will help grow your career and also grow your skill set.
That's a great, I wrote that down, running towards problems. That's a great way to think about it. And sometimes I've given people advice similarly, like, especially earlier in your career, it's great if you have ambition to keep going up. And like you said, you don't know early on exactly how far that would go. Doing your job well is really important, but showing that you're thinking ahead to the next things, the next, or, helping people picture that you have the capacity to think like the next level ahead and you're thinking about those things, problems, whatever opportunities, is smart. You know what I mean? To show people that you have that drive and that ambition and that ability, intellectual curiosity, I guess, too. Um, so let's see. So Jeffrey Morgan asks, this is a great high level question. What are the biggest challenges, technological or otherwise, to the continuing improvement and sophistication of semiconductors chips?
Yeah, so great question. I think when I think about sort of the challenges that are facing semiconductors, there are physical limits to how small you can make devices. Now, I will say that we've been predicting the end of Moore's law for like the last 20 years. So I
Mhm.
remember when I was going to school, people were saying like, Moore's law is almost done, and the fact is, you know, we're an incredibly creative and innovative industry, and we've been able to keep extending Moore's law with more and more, innovation. And I would say Moore's law is now changing. For example, we used to build chips in, I would say two dimensions, and that means that a chip would be sort of built 2D. Now we're actually stacking chips on top of each other to get, more density, to get better performance, to get lower cost. And so I think the challenges are around some of those physical limits and finding ways to kind of change the game. And, that's what, the entire industry has done. It's a very collaborative industry, I would say. And so there are a lot of collaborations across companies and across industry players. And, that will help us extend Moore's law.
So I'm picturing like a chip sandwich or maybe a triple decker
Oh,
chip sandwich. I don't know.
that's exactly how to picture it. That's exactly how to
Oh,
picture it. But they're like so tiny that you can imagine stacking these things is like an incredibly hard thing to do. But it is absolutely what we're doing today.
well, it's funny because somebody asked a question. Let me find it here. It does make me really curious. I wish we had a film to show how the manufacturing actually happens because it's quite fascinating. But somebody asked, maybe just give us a sense of the arch of chip development from concept to production to implementation. So, kind of how do you go from the drawing board to implementation? And has that, I'm sure it has, but has that shortened over time? Was one of the questions.
Yeah. So it turns out that, for very advanced chips, like I said, the chip development cycle is probably anywhere from 2 to 3 years. If you start with sort of an idea of what you want to build, and you go through a design phase. So the design phase could be 18 to 24 months. I mean, think about it. You're putting tens of billions of devices together on a semiconductor chip, and so it's a very, very complex thing. There's a lot of simulation that's done, and then you put it into prototyping phase, and that means that you'll go into manufacturing for the first time to build your prototype, and it'll either work or it won't work. And the amazing thing is, over 95% of the time, it does work, and you're able to then test it. Does it do everything you want it to do? If it's a complex thing, you might find some things that you want to change, and it'll go through a next, design and prototyping phase, and then it'll come out into production in about 3 years after you start, and then it can run for, depending on how long you want to run, it could run for the next 10 or 20 years, depending on what that particular application is. So if you think about it, that's sort of a typical design cycle for semiconductors. If you're doing something brand new, it might take 5 years. If you're doing something that's sort of incremental, it might take 18 months. But in general, that's the design and manufacturing phases.
Got it. And probably a related question has come up from a few different people is about intellectual property and protecting. So you're investing in all this, and especially when you compete with China and other countries, do you worry about IP, and how do you protect it?
Yeah, I think intellectual property is certainly, very much held close to, sort of in a close to the chest for all of us in the semiconductor industry. It's patents that we file. It's trade secrets. If you think about our designs, the designs, typically we're quite secretive about what we're putting into our designs prior to announcing the products. But in general, I think the intellectual property protection is actually fairly good across the globe, and we continue to augment that. But as I said, it's also a collaborative industry, and so we do try for major important things. We do try to follow industry standards. Such that even though we compete heavily with folks like Intel and Nvidia and companies like this, we also collaborate in certain areas, such that you can use chips from us and chips from our competitors, and the customer gets to decide what they want to use in a given application.
That maybe segues to a great question somebody asked. So when you're going out about your normal day, are you wondering if what you see in you is powered by an AMD chip? How do you know?
All
And
the
are you out
time,
there
all
all
the
the time?
time, Mary. I think about that all the time. I walk into a conference room and I'm like, how many folks are using one of my devices? But I would say the following. Um, you're not going to see AMD branded on a system, right? For those of you who are watching today, you're probably on a PC or on some type of notebook or desktop, and we're going through some type of collaboration software. So whether it's Zoom or something else, and whether you're probably touching an AMD device today. We are powering a lot of the collaboration that's happening in the cloud. Our market share in PCs right now is probably about 20-ish% or so, and growing. Gaming, we do a lot of gaming devices. So yeah, I think about whether people are using AMD, and I would love for more people to use AMD, but that really relies on us continuing to build great technology.
Well, another person asked a question about AMD chips, and it's interesting. Just was there any example of a chip that exceeded your sales expectations, or one that you thought was going to be a big hit and underperformed? And how do you take those lessons learned into the business?
Well, it's something that we do all the time from a product planning standpoint. I would say that we set out sort of long range plans for what are we going to do for the next 5 years, and what goes into those plans are things like which markets are growing, what type of technology do people need. We're very excited about the data center because of all that it can do. And data centers are extremely sophisticated. They have an incredible amount of technology in them. Frankly, they're very, very hard to do. These are very complex, chips. And the idea that we are able to power all of these connections. I mean, if you think of it, these billions of devices are connected through a back-end infrastructure. I'm very excited about this particular area and this particular market. It doesn't touch the consumer as much because it's really sort of in the back, but it's so important if you think about everything that we do. Whether you're on Twitter or whether you're on Facebook or whether you're doing any type of collaboration here, there's just a tremendous infrastructure that's required to enable all of that to happen. and we're excited about that. And yeah, we make we make adjustments too, and adjustments are things like, hey, I wish I had that feature function in my PC. Like today, one of the things that we're doing in next generation PCs is we're going to make them much more sophisticated for collaboration because people are using them so much more, right? You didn't really think about your video camera when you bought a PC 3 years ago because you would hardly use it for video. And now, like it's like the hottest new features. Like how can you
Hmm.
build better cameras and better multimedia capability because you're on your computer so much longer that it changes the way you think about what features and functions are important to you.
Right. Yeah, I was just in a meeting just this last week. What day of the week is it? Last week, I think. And somebody was using a Microsoft Surface and moving it around in a innovation center that we were visiting. And it was fun. It really was cool. I mean, it really was a way to bring together because there were people remote and there were people in the room. But it also required, I noticed, like three people to operate it. Like three, and there was like somebody moving it. There was somebody holding cameras and mics. So I was like, okay, I think this will get a little bit more automated over time, but it's a start, right? How do you feel about technology really working in this new hybrid world that we're going to be in forever?
You are totally right that we haven't figured it out, and frankly, it's one of those areas that I'm actually really excited to be
Hmm.
figuring out because we do want the hybrid work experience to be so much better. It can be so much better. Frankly, it's easier if either everybody works from home or everyone is in the office together. The hybrid environment is actually the toughest environment because you have your sort of the in-person experience, but then you also want to make sure that the folks who are not in the room have a similar appreciation for all of the dialogue that's going on. And so it's not quite there yet, Mary. I can tell you, talking to Satya, this is very high on his priority list at
Hmm.
Microsoft in terms of all of the collaboration that they have. Talking to Chuck at Cisco, same thing.
Hmm.
There's a lot of energy around how do we create that hybrid experience that is a combination of devices, sort of making them easier to use and making the devices more compatible with each other. Because we have to go between Zoom, Teams, and WebEx, and we have big and small rooms, and we have big and small group sizes. But there's a lot of effort to try to get those solutions much more
Right.
seamless and
I mean, it
easy to
is
use.
interesting, and I think it's a huge market opportunity for those who figure it out. I am a little surprised that, whatever, not to sound critical, but we've seen this coming for 2 years now, right? So I'm a little surprised that it hasn't been solved faster. I figured it might be, but okay, that's for another day. Hey, on the competitive front, we have a lot of questions, and I only have so much time. But there's two that are important on competitive. One is Apple's entrance into creating processors, which I'm not even aware of that. So you must know about that. How has it affected or influenced AMD or the industry at large?
Yeah, so Apple builds great products from phones, and they've started to build some of their own processors for
Hmm.
their Mac product line as well. It's a natural thing that people do. As you can imagine, as you need more semiconductors, and as the demand for semiconductors go up, you'll have more people building chips, and in some cases. In Apple's case, for example, they optimize the chip together with the system and then some of their software. I think these things are natural. I think our job is to make sure that we continue to build, sort of great technology that fits into lots of different customer systems and lots of different form factors. And we'll continue. The what I would say is the pace of innovation is just going up. I mean, I'm just amazed at sort of how much more. The way to think about it is if you think about the supercomputer of like 5 years ago, like you can practically get that on your laptop now. I mean, that's just how much capability we've been able to, how much we've been able to advance the capability, and we're going to continue to do that. So you're going to see lots of people building chips, but they certainly get harder and harder to build as we go forward.
And maybe we could talk a little bit about Intel. And obviously they did a great job of creating a brand. I mean, everybody remembers the Intel Inside. It's probably one of the best campaigns that's ever been done because you still remember it. But do you think, given their recognition, that that's a need or an opportunity for AMD, or is that just sort of not the most important thing to focus on?
Well, it's certainly important. I mean, Intel's a great company, and certainly they have a strong market presence. We believe that we have a very strong presence as well. We've marketed less directly to consumers, I would say, Mary, and that's perhaps the difference. If you're a CIO, we certainly want you to know AMD and think about AMD when you're choosing what you do for your enterprise. And if you're a consumer, I think you're getting to know AMD. So you'll see us a bit more out in the market, as the company grows, as we're in more and more products and that capability. But we're not about AMD inside. We're about, what's the best technology for you. And we'd like to believe that AMD offers some great technology that can be there. What I will say is, though, it's pretty interesting if you look at some markets. Like, for example, if you have a teenager who likes to build their own PCs, they probably know AMD, and
Hmm.
it's just amazing because that's this
Interesting.
demographic does their research. They go on to Tom's Hardware or Anantech or any of these tech sites, and they read, hey, what's the best processor to buy for a gaming desktop? And it'll probably say AMD, and so they know us. But you're right, the casual consumer may not know AMD, and that's one of the things that certainly is an opportunity as we go forward.
So, and one other question about Intel, going back to something we talked about earlier, which is the decoupling of design and manufacturing. They're an exception to that. And I do know they've made a big investment or planning to make a big investment in manufacturing in Ohio. So back to that question of sort of why does it make sense for them to do it? And is there anything else we can be thinking about for the US in terms of more jobs in this arena? Coming from the audience here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, different companies have different strategies, and sort of Intel has stated that their strategy is to be, what you would call an integrated device manufacturer. In other words, they design and they manufacture, and they'd like to offer manufacturing services as well. And look, I think that's a strategy. That's the strategy that they've chosen. We've chosen a different strategy, and our strategy, and frankly, our strategy is grounded in, I want to build the best technology that we can build, and recognize that you can't necessarily do that across all different disciplines, because these are very specialized disciplines. And so our strategy is, we want to be the best at building high performance microprocessors and graphics processors, and we're focused in that way, and I think that focus has helped us. Now, to your broader question about jobs in the United States and manufacturing in the United States, I think we absolutely want to encourage both U.S. headquartered companies as well as foreign companies to invest in the United States. And with that, you have the likes of Taiwan Semiconductor, who has announced plans to invest in the United States. You have Samsung is another significant semiconductor manufacturer that just announced plans to build actually here in Texas. And
Mhm.
so the idea is to have a broad ecosystem because we want more manufacturing capability. But it doesn't mean that the same person who does design must do manufacturing as well. It's just a different business model.
Right. Great. Well, we only have a few minutes left, so you're not getting off the hook without a lightning round of questions, just to learn a little bit about more about you personally, Lisa, if you don't mind. So, first part of the lightning round is about you as your use of technology. So, name your top three apps, top favorite apps, three of your favorite
Top
apps.
top three apps. Well, I'm a Microsoft gal, so we do Microsoft Office, Microsoft Teams, and I am a Twitter user, so that's probably something else.
Oh, good. We're gonna have to start following you on Twitter. Okay, Xbox or PlayStation?
Oh, you cannot ask me that question.
Well, okay, let me ask you differently. Are you a gamer?
I actually am not a great gamer. Now, I have Xbox and PlayStation. My brother, my niece and nephew, they're all gamers. My husband's a gamer. I am. I make gaming hardware.
Okay, that's good. Okay, okay. Well, I'm just gonna make you more mad. iOS versus Android.
These are difficult lightning
I
round
know.
questions here, Barry. But I must say I am an iPhone user. So
Okay. Well, partly I asked that because I'm an Android user and I'm in my house not popular because I apparently mess up the group chats every time. But what can I say? Um,
mhm.
Tell us about what's your hidden talent?
What's my hidden talent? Actually, I like to cook. I don't know if that's hidden because I don't practice it very much, but I do like to cook. It's a weekend activity every once in a while.
What's your favorite thing to make?
Uh, Chinese, home style Chinese cooking. It reminds me of what it was like to grow up. So I try to repeat some of mom's recipes.
Oh, that's awesome. Can we come over? If you could delegate one thing in the future, like a task that you have to do, a daily task that some automation could take over, what would it be?
Mm. Laundry would be nice. What do you think?
Laundry would be, folding laundry in particular would be nice.
Yes, yes.
Do you have a bucket list, and is there one thing you still haven't crossed off that you want to cross off?
Well, I would say that the bucket list continues to grow, but we do like playing golf, and so playing golf
Wow.
at lots of different places would be fun. But one day I'd like to play golf at Augusta. I think that would be a kind of a fun thing to do. So.
Awesome. Golf is my aspirational sport. It's probably never going to happen. Okay, last lightning round question. This isn't lightning round. Just help us with the future, okay? And you and I talked about this meta. The metaverse is probably the buzziest, new buzz thing after cryptocurrency. But as you think about all the factors and forces, you think about the future, define maybe what the metaverse might be to us in our lives.
Well, Mary, the metaverse is really an extension of what we're doing today. I mean, we are collaborating together. We're talking to a bunch of folks in a virtual meeting. The metaverse is really about creating a virtual world, and I do believe that we are on our way to something like the metaverse. And it's the idea that we want to be able to collaborate, do business, spend time together, work together, play together in a world that doesn't require us all to be in the same place at the same time. And so, the idea that we can continually make our interactions more realistic, and you can think about, for example, online gaming. Like, why is gaming so exciting? I mean, it's not because people want to play games with themselves. It's because they actually want to play games with their friends. They want to be in the same world. They want to be able to keep score. They want to see who wins, and they want to experience that together. That's sort of the future. And if you think about that, on steroids, it's how do we visit, Mary, that it feels more than just we're looking at each other on screen, right? I'd like to be sitting in your living room. It looks really comfortable. How do we make that feel like more of an experience? I think technology is completely capable of doing that. I mean, it's amazing what we've been able to do. But as you said earlier, we haven't even figured out a hybrid meeting yet. It still
Yeah.
takes work because we are still having to think about how we use technology. And if we do this well, you will not have to think about it anymore. It'll be so intuitive. I believe in this kind of intuitive, instinctive. You want technology to be that easy to use that everybody just wants wants to use it.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I just want to thank you for a great discussion today. And on behalf of the entire Chicago business community, I'd like to thank you for your insights and for your time with us today. It's really been valuable.